This is Sultan Daniel. I am here in the District of Columbia, here in the United States, in Washington, D.C. I'm here to follow up with the continued case of the Southern Cameroon questions. One thing I want to talk about is first with the United States. I want to appreciate the United States continued engagement on the question of the Southern Cameroon sovereignty. However, I am very disappointed with the U.S. Secretary of State for his handling of the crisis. Southern Cameroon is not something that is new. The United States is fully aware. The United States voted in 1961 to recognize the sovereign state, although it was a lesser of a sovereignty, despite the fact that 64 nations voted overwhelmingly in support of the Southern Cameroon sovereignty. Southern Cameroon met all the criteria of the United Nations to be given their rightful sovereignty and independence. United Nations Resolution 1514 called for decolonizations, and Southern Cameroon should have been decolonized, but unfortunately that did not happen. And we are in the midst of crisis, and because of the wrong judgment of the British administrator or colonial administrator that has undermined the fundamental questions of the United Nations to recognize and the policy of decolonizations. And here we are here in the midst of this crisis. And one thing I want to mention is Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea, the population is not up to the population of Southern Cameroon, and yet they have their independence and has not got any trouble spot. Southern Cameroon, for many of you that are not fully aware, Southern Cameroon is one of the most democratic institutions in the entire West Africa combined in the 50s and 60s. Despite they were able to elect a Prime Minister, Jongo Endele, and transfer power to another Prime Minister, Jongo Foncha, and later on, Joa. This significance show how maturity demonstrated by the people of Southern Cameroon. And yet, it doesn't give the signal to the British administering authority, Sir Andrew Cohen, to recognize that the people of Southern Cameroon should have gotten their independence as per se. As the crisis erupted, the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, of course, in his confirmation hearing, he speak forcefully on how he's going to face the crisis. Yet we are in the first or second year in their office, and yet nothing has been done. He crisscrossed the West African region, and yet he signaled just to talk about it like it was just a matter of internal affairs. He has not fully addressed this crisis. His office has not issued a statement. His office remained silent, as though it doesn't, even though it was one of the key topics he mentioned at the confirmation hearing at the U.S. Congress. But unfortunately, he's not forthcoming. His office remains silent. His office is now even giving access an opportunity to tackle this crisis. Of course, I understand that the United States has a larger issues, but the United States has the capability to tackle crisis anywhere around the world. The structure in place has that capacity to be able to demonstrate and strike any crisis around the world. And U.S. Secretary of State should have demonstrated this ability, but unfortunately, he just looked at it as though it was just a minor issue. And this has affected the people of Southern Cameroon, as I'm about to talk. Let's look at the relationship that existed with La Republique of Cameroon. La Republique thought we are just part of its territory, and therefore they can manipulate at will without due respect to the citizens of Southern Cameroon. I am not here to dwell on how La Republic treated, because the world is fully aware of this crisis. Let's look at how the U.S. Congress, I really appreciate U.S. Congress. I really appreciate the British Parliament, or member of British Parliament, that have written, talk about it. And yet, the arm of government that remained adamantly silent is the executive branch, the lawmaking body in various nations around the world, including the last of it is the British European Parliament. But what the Parliament hasn't forcefully is the executive branch of all the various governments, these including the United States, which I emphasize of the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. Of course, La Republic has not seen that they need to sit on the table and discuss the crisis of Southern Cameroon. They choose military options as their weapon to quell down the people of Southern Cameroon. This problem did not exist out of a blue. It existed since from the day the British administrative authority, Andrew Cohen, present the people of Southern Cameroon as a lesser territory rather than a sovereign territory to the United Nations. And all the various leaders of the world make a wrong judgment and concluded that the problems of Southern Cameroon should remain as a lesser territory. Of course, now let's look at the AFRICOM that is going on, the call African Cup of Nations. Why will African Cup of Nations organize such? Because La Republic has paid a large sum of money to these African leaders or the administering authority of the AFRICOM, and they're here to organize what they call African Cup of Nations, to show this brutal regime of phobia that everything is okay in Southern Cameroon. Let's look at some of the what is the significance of African Cup of Nations? Of course, La Republic is hoping that the significance of African Cup of Nations, it will bring the glorious victory so that somehow the crisis in Southern Cameroon will dissolve on its own. And so that will give them the upper hand to begin to quell down the people of Southern Cameroon, and that they would think about the glorious days of the Cup of Nations, and people will undermine the crisis and then give them an upper hand control. And that is the purpose of the African Cup of Nations, in which La Republic is hoping to gain. And in addition, they believe that the Ambazonia will, through the Cup of Nations, will bring a reconciliation rather than a reconciliation organized by the government with the people of Southern Cameroon in place, and discuss the structure and form of government, if there is any, that there should exist between the people of Southern Cameroon and La Republic of Cameroon. And yet, first, let's look at the Fecafoot Samuel Eto'o, the new Fecafoot leadership. Is absolutely a scam. Not a scam in the sense that he was not fully elected, but his stand on his position, on his administration, he invited Obama, I mean Obama, the former president of the United States, a certain idiot, they call him, sorry for my language, a certain guy they call Obama, that he has been using his own media to insult the people of Southern Cameroon, and that is what he has chosen to be his media empire, to focus on African Cup of Nations. Could we imagine the citizens of Southern Cameroon remember who this guy is and become an umpire in the media to talk about the Fecafoot and the African Cup of Nations, and that will somehow bring a reconciliatory tone to the people of Southern Cameroon and the neighboring country, La Republic of Cameroon. And somehow they are hoping that international community will come to their sympathy and recognize that it is that the football or the African Cup of Nations has lessened the impact and the potential problems that exist between the people of Southern Cameroon and the neighboring country like Republic of Cameroon. I wish to reaffirm that the African Cup of Nations has nothing to do with the people of Southern Cameroon. The problem of Southern Cameroon remains strong and remains fundamental, and we will stand firmly, and our request for a sovereign state of Southern Cameroon will not be diminished by the African Cup of Nations. It's just a distraction than the reality of the problem that existed in Cameroon, Land Republic of Cameroon, and the people of Southern Cameroon. So I am here in the District of Columbia, and to re-emphasize the United States commitment to do the right thing for the common good of mankind. So I don't expect the current leadership of the U.S. administration to transfer the problem to the next different administration, hopefully, if the election did not turn out being good on his way. But however, United States has the capability and the commitment to do so for the common good of mankind. And I urge the United States, especially the U.S. Secretary of State, to appoint a mediator. The United States should appoint a mediator on the crisis in Southern Cameroon, to bring La Republic of Cameroon onto the table and start immediate negotiation and the terms, on whether it's the terms of separation or on what terms they are going to decide. I want to quote example like the former U.S. Undersecretary of State, at least two of them. In a live broadcast, the former U.S. Secretary of State for African Affairs regret why he never had an opportunity, but never handled it as he was supposed to on the question of Southern Cameroon. So now I am asking the U.S. Secretary of State, is it the same thing after you leave the power? Power is something that is given, and you have a specific period in which you have it, and at a certain point, that power will no longer, and the purpose of the power is to resolve crisis. And this is a crisis of Southern Cameroon. And many Africans look upon the U.S. Secretary of State to make a commitment, appoint someone. It's not just a species, it's action, 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 action. That is what the Africans want to see the U.S. Secretary of State doing by appointing someone to mediate the crisis. That is possible. And so I hope the U.S. Secretary listens and do the right thing for the common good of humankind. This is Comrade Fulton Daniel speaking here from the United States.